Hi, Free Doomed fans. Hope you're out there fighting the power today and making a difference. I've just been ruminating on the irony of the concept of fight the power and the whole idea of question authority, and that these are predominantly liberal themes. But what are you supposed to be questioning? What authority? What power are we supposed to be fighting? Is it the power of big government or the power of something else? A little food for thought. So another thing I was thinking about is a quote by George Santayana. It's often misquoted. The actual quote is, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." We've heard different variations of this, but that's the actual correct form. Anyway, this resonated with me because our nation is facing a crisis of memory. Despite the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the crumbling of the Soviet Union, despite the failure of the welfare state in Europe, with Greece insolvent and Spain and Portugal not far behind, despite the explosive growth of China and other emerging markets that has resulted from the adoption of free market mechanisms, somehow the belief survives that centrally planned economies and generous welfare states are tenable forms of government. Nearly every great empire in history has crumbled as a result of government overreach. Such ambition often manifests in the form of military aggression or imperial expansion, as was the case with Rome, Spain, or Great Britain, who at their peak administered 25% of the world's population. Other times we see the decay result from governments attempting to control every decision about what is produced and in what quantities, rather than leaving such decisions to the tastes and preferences of consumers and producers. Such thinking doomed the entire Eastern Bloc power structure and led to its dramatic collapse 20 years ago. As long and hard as they tried, the Soviet Politburo could never allocate resources nearly as efficiently as could private parties making decisions between buyer and seller, producer and consumer, or doctor and patient. Another more insidious form of overreach is an overly generous welfare and social services state. Such policies insulate citizens from any kind of misfortune, even if it results from their own poor judgment. Greece is now insolvent due to such policies, with much of the Eurozone not far behind. Sweden is another great example of this. Their 100-year ascent, which started in the 1870s and was followed by a 20-year descent, which ended in financial crisis, is an exact mirror image of 100 years of low regulation, taxation, and welfare benefits, followed by a period of rapidly increasing taxation and government benefits and services and involvement in the economy. When great nations fall, they exhibit telltale signs, and the United States is flashing red. Broadly shared prosperity. Politicians who are mainly self-interested. A complacent and ignorant populace. A massive and growing appetite for government services by a public that feels entitled to them. A lack of understanding of where our nation's prosperity came from, or the sacrifices that were required to achieve it. Our doom is by no means imminent, although we're very well down the path that many other formerly great nations have traveled. Our nation is slightly past its zenith, most likely, although it is difficult to imagine the loss of our way of life because we have never known anything else. Such erosion is gradual and difficult to observe over a short time frame in patterns of employment, consumption, or government services. The government just seems to function and to provide. The relationship between private production and government services becomes blurry when the economy is so large and the central bank so powerful. When the wants of citizens, the rhetoric of politicians, political correctness and what feels right, or seems right become more powerful than our founding values and what drives our economic engine, we're in grave danger. Supporting a plain English interpretation of the Constitution is now portrayed as quaint or simplistic. Recently, such behavior has even been characterized as extreme or radical by the press and even by the highest levels of government. This outright contempt for the Constitution is antecedent to tyranny. The endemic shame and self-loathing of so many Americans is evidence of an advanced state of decay. Unless incentives to invest, innovate, and save are strengthened, our ascent out of recession will continue to be slow, and the risk of sliding back into negative growth will persist. Firms must be allowed to read the market to determine which products or services to provide, instead of being forced to read the government and anticipate their next moves. The irrational forces that drive governments, such as rent-seeking, political advantage, and special interests, almost never result in the efficient allocation of resources or the development of truly useful, valuable, or innovative technology. When markets are allowed to function, however, and competitive forces are unleashed, it results in the most valuable innovation, the maximum wealth creation, and therefore the maximum job creation. Unless government is put back in its proper place, servants of the public, we will continue to shrink into the shadows of our former greatness.